Yeah. So I mean, basically the purpose of the meeting is a chance to ask questions and to things that folks who want to contribute forecasts have on their mind, and touch base before the first forecast is due at the beginning of the month, at the end of this month. Can go over and like summarize the general kind of framework if that's helpful, if people are at that level, or if there are specific comments or in questions that folks have. What would be most useful?
Yeah, I'm happy to hear from anybody in the group or the teams that are competing. I was just rewatching the EFI standards for submitting forecasts, so it could be useful to talk as a group how different forecasts would be submitted. But there's also it might be useful just to recap what the exact challenge is. Right, we're all using the same
And walk through resources.
data.
I can
Yeah,
walk
the resources. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that sounds good. Cool. I'll share my screen. And anyone on the design team or speak up and share thoughts, and folks who have joined us who are planning to contribute, ask questions as we go along. Let's see. I'll just share my screen. All right. So folks probably know that so it's under the Neon Forecasting Challenge, and here are the different rules for that. And so this group is. Why is this frozen? There we go. So here are the different themes, and here's the participation guidance. So again, what it's NEE, evaporation, ET, and soil moisture at 4 neon sites. And kind of, we can get into this in a second, but we're actually, we're focusing on the turbulent exchange of CO2 because of issues that the design team found with some of the storage fluxes. So we're taking the neon data, and I'll show you where all those calculations are done. ET and then soil moisture, and it ranges from kind of a wet, very closed canopy system to so a New Hampshire site, a Florida site, which is dry but warm, but not as dry as you move towards the west of Kanza and Santa Rita. So these are the 4 sites that we're forecasting. And when, so it's half hour or daily forecasts, and it's for 35 days in the future. And any teams that register, and then everyone go on.
The 35 days in the future.
35 days in the futures.
A little bit confusing.
I think we have an echo. There we go. So yeah, we'll get through the timing in a second. Let's see. Yeah, so basically on by January 31st, you submit a forecast that starts on January 1st. Huh? Yeah.
January 1st. And so like by the end of the month, we might only forecast 4 or 5 days in the future, but essentially using the GEFS forecast that was issued on the first day of the month, January 1st.
Yes. And neon data does not become available. And the neon data for January at the earliest would become available on February 15th. So it is data that no one has seen. And so in that sense, and it's using forecasted drivers. So in that sense, it is a 35-day forecast. And so those are kind of the broad rules, all right? Meaning that how you get your model to January 1 or February 1 or March 1, that's up to you. You can, like how you initialize your model, you could initialize it because you ran the model for that location over the past 10 years. Or you could, start your model up with neon data of biomass at the site. You could have assimilated data before. So what you do before January 1 or is up to you. During January 1 in this example, you can't assimilate data within the month that we're forecasting, meaning that you can't use, say, Modus LAI from January 20th in your forecast.
Can I ask a question also? I could probably get to this, but we have the NOAA data that goes over that 35-day period that we can use as well. Is that correct?
Yes. All right. So here is a link, and here it goes to our bucket where the data sit, and this is all neon sites. And which one is? Let's see. We are talking about Bartlett. So you go into here. And here are forecasts that we've been saving since back in September that are available for you to build your model, to see how well your model does at forecasting, but with data already collected. And so here's January 1, you would go into here and you go into 00, and within there is a 31 ensemble member. Actually, there's only 30 ensemble members that go all the way for all 35 days as a Netcdf file. And this has the typical drivers that you would need at the hourly scale for a land surface model. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And so those are available for you, and they're processing. I mean, you can come here, and this is all. Whoops. This is all automated, where you can see that. I mean, NOAA's actually been down for the past few days, so it's not up to date. But here is from 6 o'clock. The forecast has started at 6 a.m. UTC. We've already processed from the 21st. So the data link in the chat window, we can put that in there, but if it's not easily findable in the rules, then let us know. Let's see. So you use those drivers to run your model for 35 days. And if your model doesn't have any uncertainty in your model, then you will, part of the metric that we're using to evaluate this, the metric we're using is called the continuous rank probability score. And what that does is it's a proper scoring rule that accounts for both uncertainty and the kind of mean behavior. And so if you submit a single line, just one trajectory, then you're going to be basically saying that you are extremely confident in your answer. in your forecast. And if that does not perfectly predict the data, it'll be heavily penalized. And one with uncertainty that isn't as accurate, but the uncertainty encompasses the data, will score better then. And so even if your model does not represent uncertainty in, say, parameters or process uncertainty or other kind of random source of uncertainty, we highly recommend running through all the ensemble members, so at least you have weather uncertainty accounted for. Cool. And then you submit by either uploading to a bucket where you kind of can upload a file to the submission bucket, or we give code on how to do that programmatically. Let's see. So there's a GitHub repository that has, all right, so the term targets is the thing you're trying to forecast. And so we have a GitHub repository that basically has an entire workflow for generating a forecast, where we're generating the null forecast. And in that case, this workflow actually is downloading data from Neon. And this gets triggered to run every day. You don't need to do that because we're doing that for you to make the data available for you. Our workflow then runs a script that's in the same GitHub repository that processes the raw Neon data so you can see how the data are being processed. And then it runs a null model. In our case, a null model is persistence, or a random walk. Since it's a state space model, it's effectively a random walk that the behavior that emerges is a kind of a persistence with a growing cone of uncertainty. And so, if you're interested in how the data that we're comparing to are produced, this is the script that does that in R for you, or for us.
And briefly, the soil moisture is only from 15 centimeters depth. It's not a, at all the sites they're at 15 centimeters. And for the Flux data, did we also filter like above 50 and below 50? Just getting those out of there.
So you can see, and the filtering is in the data that so programmatically what the filters that were applied. Also, the important thing is that so Neon gives their kind of QA/QC codes, and we've met with Neon to discuss this. One question you might have is, why is there so many gaps in the data? Well, that's where that's following Neon's QA/QC code, and we don't want to be forecasting data that we don't believe. And so if you feel that there's not enough data here to effectively build a model off the data, then that's part of the challenge, is to take the limited data that might be at the site, combine it with other data, other prior knowledge you might have, models you've already built, to produce something that you think is reasonable for these sites. If your model is a daily model, because Flux data can be heavily biased with gaps, where daytime tends to pass the filters more often than nighttime data. How many half hours should be included in a daily estimate of NEE? Too few might bias it towards the day. Too many will result in not enough days being included. So that's a trade-off that's fundamental in the target. And we chose based on prior work by folks on the design team, to basically, there's 48 half hours in a day, and you have to have, a day has to have at least 44 pass that criteria of inclusion, so that we are confident that it's not biased towards the daytime. So subsequently, the daily data is fairly thin, but that's a reality of working with Neon data, and and oftentimes robustly working with some of the Flux data.
Can I ask a question there again as well?
Absolutely.
And kind of maybe for other teams, is anyone needing to do gap filling for their forecasts, and is there like a standard methodology that's either recommended or common to use for that if you wanted to gap fill?
To gap fill Flux or to gap fill the local meteorology? Which one are you trying to?
Let's say the Flux.
Folks that work on Flux can probably tell better what the options are, but I mean, the Ameriflux is a standard pipeline for all of that, but this data is released much more quickly than it would become, than that gap-filled data would become available in Ameriflux. But I believe the tools that they use under the hood are well established and well documented. I think Neon's tools are also available in a Docker container. Ankur, you know much more about this than I do. Maybe you should.
Right. I mean, what Ameriflux is using is the one Flux pipeline, which is their combined QA/QC into gap filling. The gap filling is just our EDIproc, which is an R package, which is relatively easy to use. So yes, gap filling is possible. There's challenges with this kind of data because it's gappy and it's coming in chunks. And so usually it's easier to gap fill like a year or more of data at a time, given the way the algorithm works.
So something that we haven't done is supply kind of historical data for the meteorology at these sites. Partially, the reason why we've done that is one, it's gappy as well, and Neon is working on gap filling and developing a gap filled product at the hourly or half hourly scale for Neon sites. And for us to do that for this challenge would be reinventing a major wheel that they're working on now. The other is not all models need weather. We envision this as like, here's a time series and fit your favorite model to it. And in many cases, they are process models that require drivers, but we didn't want to kind of force that upon folks. So let's see. But Neon does have metadata available. It's just gappy. You should be aware of that. So the targets are located. So the GitHub repository also has tools for generating the metadata. So here's an example of a forecast that we're generating. This is the null forecast, and you could, if you're interested in, I mean, in some cases, folks who signed up are planning to use kind of like a named land surface model, and so this may not be as informative. If others are interested in kind of developing a simple ecosystem model or applying a set of differential equations or things like that, then this could be an example that you could use to see how a kind of a random walk is implemented in a hierarchical Bayesian state space framework. And so we've done that, but what's also contributed here is down at the bottom, there's some functions here for generating the metadata, which could be useful. And so we, there's a function in the repository called generate metadata. And as long as you fill out this sort of metadata file here, then it can and you have your basically your saved forecast file, it can process your metadata for you. And for example, this is what the metadata file looks like the team names, the contributors, the sites, and some information on kind of what is describing the model. And there's details of these are in the metadata, or not the forecasting standard document that we link to. But this helps us understand what kind of model you're working with. So a lot of that's available here on the repository that you can explore and play around with. There's also, related to that, are a few functions that you might find useful. One is, how do you download the Netcdf files easily? And they sit in what's called a AWS S3 bucket. And we created a function that's very simple, download the files, that enters the information that you need. And so if you give it the site you want, the date you want, the cycle that you want, and where you want it to save, it'll create the S3 bucket for you at that location on your computer. And so you run this once and it gets all the ensemble members for that date and that cycle for you to work with. And so that's something that we thought would make life easier for folks. And then the other is, we wrote a function that if you don't want to work with Netcdf and you want to work with CSVs, it converts that Netcdf to a CSV for you. So that's available in the shared utilities on the GitHub, which we link to. Where's that link? Somewhere in here. Cool. So you can access the target data here. Here's the daily and the 30-minute. And then, oops. And then also linked an example of a forecast for our null forecast, so you can see the format. And the reason why that is important is because we're automatically scoring. So at shiny.ecoforecast.org is an app that automatically allows you to visualize, and it automatically scores the forecasts. And so, for example, here's our null forecast for back in August when we were doing testing with the data up here. And then down here is the full time series of data for Bartlett. This is for the daily. We can look at the 30-minute. Looks like we don't have a null 30-minute forecast as an example, but here's like the data for the forecast for the 30 minutes here for any. You can play around with this because it's got the latent energy and the volumetric soil water content, and you can add different sites. And so your model will show up here based on your team name, and you'll be able to visualize it. And then you get to see the forecast date. Like here is our null models forecast for January. And for Bartlett, it's not very good because there was the data was not available to really constrain the initialization, but it's much more constrained for the desert site. And you can see there's no data there to compare to. And then the scoring, and it's designed to do similar things for all the themes. And then the scoring is on this tab. And so you can come in and see that, all right, here's the daily for the terrestrial. And so every single day in the forecast horizon is scored. So like this is Bartlett for a forecast that started on August 1st. This is the forecast for August 2nd. So that's a time horizon of 1 day for Bartlett, and there's no score because there was no data on that day. And so we do this by site, by day, by team, and then you can summarize. So for example, NEE for summarize across start dates. Let's see. There's a score. Let's see, where is it? Horizon. There we go. So this is summarizing across all horizons. So this is combining 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, 4 days in the future on a single, taking the average CRPS score. So you can see we were better. Our best forecast date, our best forecast was basically Kanza back in August for the null model. But that gives you an example of the score. And so your model will be able to populate this. Cool. Any questions or anything, folks? I'll continue walking through it, but one to stop.
So do you have any data for the initial conditions of vegetation? So vegetation and soil, I think the soil carbon would affect the short-term predictions. Do you have the data for that? Or we should spin up our model to equilibrium state?
All that data exists. We haven't pre-processed it though. So you can use any of the data that's on the Neon website, and there's definitely inventory plot data within the tower footprint for all the Neon sites, as well as quantitative soil pits for all the Neon sites. So that all that data is publicly available on the Neon site. We didn't pre-process it because from our perspective, it's not clear that anything that we would do to pre-process it would be any more useful than Neon's native format for any particular model.
Plus, there isn't. One does have to go through the process of going from individual trees up to plots, and Neon doesn't officially do that. So we don't have there's no official product for that. So we would have to make a lot of decisions on how to do that for you. You can also initialize with satellite data. You could initialize with however you want. Again, this is seeing which models can forecast data they haven't seen the best. And so if the models that all spin up to equilibrium do the best, then then we've learned something. Or if the ones that are are observations.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, because I need the vegetation structure data to initialize my model. So it will. The initial conditions can affect the carbon flux and the water flux a lot.
So the key, your example is exactly why we didn't pre-process it, because you probably need the actual inventory data from Neon. Others might want total carbon stuff to initialize.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I will check. So I can get the vegetation data from Neon site, right? From the description of Neon sites.
Yeah. So at Neon, you can go into the data. Port.
Mm-hmm.
And you can search. Vegetation structure, I think. Woody plant vegetation structure. And this is all their their data for the site of all their plots. And it will take a little bit of time to figure out how to work with this. But that's the nature of Neon data, and we want to get the community different people working with this in different ways will help us accomplish finding out the best way to work with this. And tailoring this for your particular model is up to you, but the data is there.
I'd also add that we'd strongly encourage folks to make use of the Slack channel to discuss issues like this. So if you can't find vegetation data, or you find the data and you've come up with a great way of processing it, or you want to argue with folks about your favorite allometries, any of those things are fair game on the Slack channel. Also, our team, we have not spun up the cohort-based models that we use yet either, so we have it pre-processed on our side yet, but we're in the process of processing it to pool information, but again, that requires subjective choices about which allometries you use and stuff like that.
And so one of the big take homes is that this is the first round of a multi-round kind of forecasting challenge that we aim to run over the duration of the Ecological Forecast Initiative, RCN, which is a 5-year NSF project. And we will call the project a success if by the end, a lot of these things are available for folks to do. More people are using, there's more code, there's more approaches to working with Neon data to deal with all these challenges. The way we're going to get there is by trying to do it. The first round is going to be, much more beta than the later rounds. And we'll have more shared community resources as we go through. So that's both I'm really excited that everyone's here. And we want to make this be as awesome as possible as a group and a collaborative kind of community doing this. While everyone understanding that we're in this together as a kind of being kind of the first to really tackle something like this, using a network that's collecting the data that we're not in control of, that is genuinely predicting the future, and we're working through the kinks together. So the most important thing is just communication, asking questions, not making assumptions, pointing out where things aren't clear. There's no off-base questions. There's a question about, can we access the data sets used for evaluation and scoring? Absolutely. There's no in sample, out of sample. That's what we're calling the targets. So you click there, and that's available for you to build your model. The data that will be, you cannot access the data used to evaluate your model because that doesn't exist yet. You can use the data here for building your model because that has been collected. And then as you go, so this data, when the new data gets collected, you can use that to assimilate in your model and update your model. And so it's fair game for updating your model for the next round or for the next submission. So we 100% recommend using the past data to inform, and up to date. That's why we are starting the forecast at January 1, is so that Neon's data for December 31st will come out mid-January, which it already has, and will allow you to then update your model using the data from December. So that's exactly why we designed the rules the way that they are. Cool. So participation guidance, registering. And again, we're looking for an ensemble-based forecast. And so think about how you would make multiple trajectories for your model that you think are either equally likely, or you give the weights for each ensemble member. Again, we have a Slack channel, and there's GitHub available for you to see some tools. And the Slack is getting questions and will be a great resource for folks. You need to submit your forecast with the right naming convention of your file, because that is what's used to do the auto-generating scoring. So we need theme name, year, month, day, and then team ID. And then there needs to be a specific column names in your submitted file too. Down here is a link to the metadata format that we're looking for. And then submission process. This is an example of using our code to do the submission if you don't want to just click the button to upload it. Participation agreement, neon data use, and then just other data. You're welcome to use other data, publicly available data at the site to build your models. They just can't be within the time period that's being forecasted. Here's a link to the shared forecast drivers. I showed you those links, and here's a link to those tools. And here's where you can get a link to the 1 hour NOAA drivers. Talks about evaluation. This talks about the actual scoring function. We have null forecasts, etc. So that's a big overview of the process. So I think I'm happy to now, open it up for more questions or any thoughts from others.
It might be interesting to hear what types of approaches teams are using, just to promote.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not very knowledgeable, so I think I might just go for a linear model. It's very basic, but I think I know how to. At least I think I know how to do it right now.
Who's planning to submit a forecast? I know some folks are here as part of the design team. Is everyone here planning to submit a forecast?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand how to run the model. So that's why I'm asking about the forcing data and the initial conditions. I think for model E, the model I will use here, so I can simulate hourly carbon and water fluxes. So I have to follow. I have to have a new output format to be consistent with your requirement, right?
Yeah, it should be just converting your output format into another like CSV format. You would
okay, yeah. Currently, I'm using CSV to record the single site runs.
And I imagine also for a single trajectory as well.
What? Sorry, I just missed. So,
Oh, imagine you come across a vertical trajectory.
yeah.
And so if you want to run better ensemble, have different files that need to be combined together.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think for the initial model runs, I needed to So I needed to speed up a little bit. Yeah, because the initial conditions, especially for the solid water conditions, it should be equilibrated with input and output. So I'm just thinking how to do that. But I don't know if I can submit this round predictions. But I will say if I can get the model right, it would be easy for predictions. But I don't know.
But you're tackling one of the big challenges in ecological forecasting is how do you visualize your model?
No, yeah, I think currently I just need to figure out how to set it up. Once I set it up, so if you have new forcing data coming in, then I can easily to do the next 35 days forecast. So cool. Thank you.
Someone else want to go who's planning to submit a model?
Yeah, sure. Actually kind of representing 3 teams here. We're not really doing ecological, like sort of physics-based models, using some ideas from like nonlinear dynamics and machine learning. We've been talking with some ecologist collaborators, so they're interested in how this will work with real world data like this. So it'll be interesting. We're not quite up to speed on 2 of the models. I don't know if we'll have forecasts for the first round, but we are working on it, and yeah, certainly very interested in this challenge. And it's nice to have different groups working on the same data to have this nice comparison.
So you hit on a couple of good points. One, there's no expectation of submitting to every single round. In fact, there's some classes that are being taught in various universities that, when the semester's over, we hope the students continue submitting, but they probably won't. And so no one should feel a pressure to if you don't submit to every single one of them, you're not contributing. So, when you feel comfortable, we're excited to see your forecast come in.
Great. Did you say, so I think on the website it said this is kind of run for a year, but then you mentioned this is part of like a 5-year project?
Yes.
For NSF? Okay. Yeah, because there's definitely we're just getting started with this. A lot of variations and things we would want to play around with, like just trying to do what we can with raw data or gap filling, and just seeing how all this stuff affects predictions. Yeah. Cool.
So the point of the multiple years is that we're going to learn what rules work and what approaches work, and revise kind of the rules for next year based on what we're learning from this time. So your experience submitting forecasts and the experience evaluating them and trying to learn from them will inform kind of next year's rule set.
So you said this is like an NSF thing. Is there a link to some NSF description of this, like their interest in this forecasting project or something along those lines?
So the whole RCN, can you dump that in there? So it's a research coordination network that's funded by NSF. So we wrote a proposal to NSF. So NSF, is interested in the degree to which they funded our proposal. And so the proposal is to coordinate the community of ecological forecasting by focusing on neon data. And our primary tool for doing that is via these like formalized forecasting challenges.
Great, thanks.
But yeah, so there's a link to the Resource Coordination Network, and also if you just want to see the award from NSF, it's there as well.
So I guess I could go next to say that Katie and I are planning on submitting runs using SIPNet, which is a simplified version of PNet, which is a simple pool-based ecosystem model. At least that's what we'll trying to get up and running for the first round. Hopefully the number of models we submit will grow over time, because we've actually got I think 16 models in-house connected to Pecan, with probably something like Ed2 being our next priority, just because it's been a long favorite in the lab.
And you're also teaching a class this semester.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm teaching a forecasting class, and based on current enrollment, we'll probably end up participating in 3 out of the 5 forecast challenges, and I do not know until the students fill out a poll expressing interest which 3 those will be. I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be this, phenology, and ticks, because those are the 3 that start before the end of the semester. But I could yeah. There's also an aquatic challenge and a beetle biodiversity challenge.
I'm not submitting one as the lead of the project, because I don't. But I am teaching a class that will have students submitting, and my students are required to submit an individual one. So there might be 12 forecasts, but they can submit to whatever challenge they want to. Anyone else?
I'm not submitting something in the first round, working towards it, but defending my PhD first year in a few weeks. So timing not right in this initial round, but like Alex, learning my way towards an eventual, probably very simple submission. But it'll be interesting to see the many complex and different ways that these groups tackle the forecast.
Hi, everyone. So we are a team from Berkeley National Lab and the University of Washington. We will use E3SM NAN model. And so our team includes Dr. Chinju from from Berkeley Lab, and me, myself. We are very excited for this challenging, but we also cannot, we are afraid we cannot submit our first forecast on January 31st, but hopefully we can catch up soon later. I have a very general question about the outcomes of this activity. Are we planning to assemble all the results together and come up a paper or report or something?
That's the goal, yes.
Okay.
We have a special issue in a journal that's awaiting submissions through 2022. So there's plenty of time, but the goal is to pull things together in some capacity, whether it's per theme. You can also submit it for your own. You could submit a paper for your own model yourself that doesn't, that wouldn't be limited by others. Or we have to figure out what makes most sense for what we can learn from it. But we're definitely working in that capacity.
Just a little bit more detail that the special issue is approved in MDPI forecasting with a March 2022 deadline, which means we should be able to start. I'm hoping we can start analyses before the end of the forecast challenge itself, to kind of talk about how we want to score things, how we want to slice and dice things, so that we're kind of getting the analysis pipelines up and running and then have a few months to kind of finalize the writing before the deadline early next year. We've also been talking to ESA about doing a special issue later in the RCN for the later rounds.
Great, good to know.
Yep. I have a question. So for the E3SM, how are you anticipating creating kind of ensemble or uncertainty in your forecast?
Tim, you want to talk about that? Well, I can just go talk briefly. Okay, so so currently we are still thinking about how to get the hindcast ready, because we need to get the initial results by end of December, and then we can go for the forecast. So we haven't have all the historical run yet. We are planning to use some reanalysis data that has short latency, for example, maybe MERA2 or some other reanalysis data, and then we can have a hindcast ready for the forecast. And then the uncertainties, well, there are a lot of different things contributing to uncertainties, surface data sets, and also our parameterizations. We would have a very large, we anticipate a large ensemble of the uncertainties. Well, so but at this stage, as I just mentioned, we may not contribute to the first forecast. We will happy to see other teams how this works, how the forecast results are submitted, and how this whole thing ran through, and then hopefully for the next round forecast we can submit our results, and then we can better format our forecast.
Great.
Thank you. I also want to, if some other groups can talk about how they would come up with the hindcast, that would be great. Like the historical run to the December 31st, and then you start for the forecast with the NOAA's forecast, meteorology forecast.
So I can speak briefly. The neon towers that we're using have data from maybe 2017, maybe 2018, but most all of them have 2019. I've used DayMet for daily historical observations. There's also Ameriflux towers that are somewhat close by. Have we shared where those Ameriflux towers are? There's different time lapse, but I think there's a tower at Bartlett that's 200 meters away from the neon tower. But for Santa Rita, yeah, there's other Ameriflux towers that might be useful for hindcasting and historic data.
So somewhere linked off of the web page is our Google Doc that's our larger design doc, and that one does list, I remember writing it down, what all the Ameriflux sites are near each of the sites. It also provides a link to, worth knowing that Oak Ridge DAC is doing subsets for every neon sites for a whole list of remote sensing products from NOAA, from MODIS and VIIRS and SMAP and a few other products. So if you want to try, using remote sensing as a constraint on your forecast, those are also handy.
So under the section here describing this theme, it says this link right here includes details about the targets, how they're calculated. If you click on that, it takes you to a Google Doc that has information about the focal variables and the sites, and then here, basically other sources of data for modeling. These are the Ameriflux sites that are nearby that we identified as close. They may not be the exact same vegetation type, like the Orway Swisher like this, I mean, it's not /pine, Orway Swisher's not, but the nearest Flux tower sites in, geographically are /pine. But, this is data. We don't make this data available because you have to go, because of Ameriflux data policies. So you would need to go through the Ameriflux database to gain access to those. And this is information about the subsets for the sites as well.
Thanks. Can you also put the link here? So much information that I'm afraid I cannot find the link.
I've also been, I'll put the link to the Google Doc that I've been taking notes on, and all these links are on that Google Doc too.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jody.
Yeah.
And we're also recording this, and we'll make it available as well. Cool. Others? Cool. So I'm really excited, super pumped, and really glad everyone was able to attend. And we'll, again, this time doesn't work for folks around the world, so that's why we're recording it. But I hope that it was informative for you to be able to ask questions. And if you have more questions, the Slack channel, email, we want to help support you in that, and no question is off base. You may get a response, can you help us develop that, if it's asking for something that is a way to process neon data or something like that as a community, but we're happy to answer questions. I don't know. If there are any remaining questions, I think we can thank everybody.
I was going to say thank you, Quinn, for running through the challenge. It's really helpful to hear it.
Cool.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you, guys.
Yeah.